Yeah, just 1 minute. I'll wait. Yeah, then I'll start. Okay, come on. Let's quickly revise and thereafter we'll go forward. Listen. Last time onwards, we started with this chapter 3, which is audit documentation and evidence, although we people are learning in the reverse category. First, we are what learning is nothing but audit evidence. And then now, obviously, today what we will also do is audit documentation. Talking about audit evidence, firstly, it is covered by the provisions of SA 500. Talking about audit evidence, what is the meaning? You already know. It is nothing but information on which the auditor basis is opinion is known as audit evidence, but this audit evidence should be sufficient and appropriate. Now, sufficient and appropriate, those also meanings you need to know. I told you that sufficiency is basically, I hyperlize the measure of quantity of audit evidence. So ultimately your audit evidence should be enough. On the other hand, appropriateness is not a measure of quantity, but it is a measure of quality. So it should be relevant also and reliable also. By the way, can I say sufficiency and appropriateness, both of them are interrelated? Acha, they should exist independently or they should coexist? Coexist, correct. So always remember, it is not sufficient or appropriate, it is sufficient and appropriate. Talking more about audit evidence, think and answer. Audit evidence only includes information which is there in the books of accounts and financial statements, or it includes other information also? It includes other information also. Basically, can I say that other information that we people are talking about is basically nothing but the supporting evidence? Acha, can you give me simple examples? Minutes book, confirmation from debtors, etc. So can I say these what you get are nothing but supporting evidence? Okay. On the other hand, we people did nothing but the different types of audit evidence, or you can also say classification of audit evidence. Okay. Now, as far as your types of audit evidence are concerned, I hope it is basically of two types. Firstly, it is nothing but segregated on the basis of its nature, and secondly, on the basis of the source. As far as nature is concerned, how many further reclassifications are there? Three. Which three? Correct. Oral, documentary, and visual. Acha. Oral is basically, I hope, is verbal. Documentary is basically written, and visual is basically to see and observe. Okay. Now one by one. First was nothing but oral. Acha. In oral evidence, can you give me an example? Inquiry with the management. So supposing I hope if at all you people do inquiry, what do you mean by inquiry? Can I say inquiry is basically to ask? So supposing if at all I ask the management, batao, then whatever they batao me, whatever they tell me, I hyperlize verbally or orally. Can I say what I'm getting is information, and the nature of the information is oral? Come on. Second is documentary. Give me an example of documentary. Correct. Can I say it is written confirmation from debtors? Perfect. You remember I had given you an example of this entire debtor thing. Supposing in the balance sheet of the company, there is the debtor. So obviously in the debtor's book, company should be creditor. You remember? Then I was writing a letter to the debtor. Then the debtor should write a letter to the auditor, whether the company is a creditor or not. And thereafter, once you receive the letter, it is known as confirmation. Okay. Visual, simple example. Correct. Observing stock count. So for a simple example, if at all auditor goes to the go down and verifies whether management is conducting proper stock verification or not. So obviously he will go there, he will see, he will observe, he will see, he will observe, we will get information. And therefore that information is visual. On the other hand, when you talk about sources, only two sources are possible. Either the source will be internal or the source will be external. Acha, internal is generated within the organization. External is generated outside the organization. Acha, give me example of internal evidence. Books of accounts, records, whatever you generate inside is basically, I hope, realize your internal evidence. Okay. On the other hand, what about external? Give me example. Confirmation from debtors, bank statements, purchase invoices, etc. Because when you purchase anything, obviously that particular person will give you the invoice. So that becomes nothing but I hope realize external. All cool? All cool. Thereafter, we people discussed one important aspect, which was on the reliability of audit evidence. Acha, think and answer. Your reliability of audit evidence only depends upon the nature. No, no. Acha, acha, sorry. It depends only upon the source. No, no, no. Can I say depends upon the nature and the source? Acha. As far as reliability is concerned, simple. How many statements are there? Yeah. Simple 5 statements. Not difficult at all. Huh? Come on. External evidence is more reliable than internal evidence. Internal evidence is reliable provided. Correct. ICS is efficient. Acha. Thereafter, documentary evidence is more reliable than oral. Acha. Thereafter, audit evidence obtained by the auditor himself is more reliable than obtained from the management or entity. And lastly, original is more reliable than duplicate. You can say duplicate also, you can say photocopies also. Eventually, it means one and the same. Perfect. Thereafter, we people did one important question, 6 to 8 marks, which was methods or techniques to obtain audit evidence. Okay. It means in order to obtain audit evidence, what all the auditor should do. For that, I gave you a key. What is the key? Correct. Ore ICI. That is how you remember. So you don't say Ore PI, you say Ore ICI. Now one by one. Come on. O stands for observation. Acha, what do you mean by observation? Can I say it is to see? So once you see, you get information. Then ultimately, hopefully that is one of the methods. Come on. Next is reperformance. What do you mean by reperformance? First, who has done? Correct. Management. Acha, now who will do? Auditor. Why? To check what management have done, whether it is correct or not. Simple example I gave you with respect to ICS. Supposing I ask to the management, batao, how is your ICS? They will tell, sir, it is best in the world. Will I rely blindly? No. Can I say I will have to also verify myself? So what they verified first, now I am verifying. Why? To verify what they are telling is correct or not. Come on, next one. External confirmation. A simple example. Can I say debtors confirmation? By the way, in external confirmation, what will happen? Can I say the debtor should directly tell to the auditor whether the amount is matching or not? Thereafter, inspection. Inspection is checking basically. Acha, simple example, say auditor wants to examine nothing but the title deeds. So when he examines or he inspects the title deeds to check whether the ownership belongs to the company or not, that is nothing but inspection. Thereafter, recalculation. What do you mean by recalculation? Again, first to calculate it, management. Now who is calculating? Auditor. Why? To check whether what management have calculated is accurate or not. Thereafter, analytical procedures. I gave you simple example of ratios and trend analysis. Although in detail we will learn when we do chapter 8 on analytical procedures, which is covered by SA 520. But as of now, you should at least understand ratios and trend analysis. If you remember, I gave you an example that GP ratio was 25. Now it has become 5. So it is a normal decrease or it is a unusual decrease? Unusual decrease. Then why did it happen? Auditor will have to investigate. So when he does such analysis, that is known as analytical procedures. Acha, similarly, trend analysis. I hope Rice company was on the upward trend, making profit. Suddenly nose down. Now I hope Rice, if that happens, then ultimately the trend is broken. The trend is broken, then obviously auditor will have to verify why is the trend broken. Is it due to some normal business practices or ultimately there is some fraudulent activity? And lastly, inquiry. What do you mean by inquiry in simple words? To ask for information. So whenever I ask, why do I ask? Correct, to get information. That inquiry also is one of the methods. All cool? So how do you remember? Ore ICI. As simple as that. Okay. Thereafter, we people, I think, copied this part, but we have not learned that. It is still left. Now, come to audit procedures. Now, Talking about nothing but audit procedures, your audit procedures is basically divided into two categories. This is the chart of audit procedures. Firstly, there are risk assessment procedures, and the next are known as other audit procedures. Now, what are risk assessment procedures? I will not tell you now. I will tell you when we people do chapter 4 together, not now. Okay. It is very simple. Risk assessment procedure, as the name suggests, these are procedures to assess how much risk is there in audit, whether the risk is more or whether the risk is less. And according to that, auditor will decide his course of action. So in detail, risk assessment procedures, we will see when we do chapter 4. Talking about other audit procedures, they are segregated or divided into two. One, test of controls, and second, substantive procedures. Your substantive procedures is further broken up into two: test of details and analytical procedures. Your test of details consists also of two things. One is vouching, another is verification. Vouching is basically checking nothing but P&L items, and verification is checking balance sheet items. See, as of now, we are not bothered with this, but definitely as of now, we are bothered with this. So let us talk about other audit procedures. Firstly, it is which one? Test of controls. So first you need to understand what are test of controls. Now hear carefully. Test of controls is basically nothing but checking the ICS. Repeating. Test of controls is basically nothing but checking the ICS. Now think and answer. Who sets up the ICS? Management. Acha. Who implements? Management. Who maintains? Management. Who will check? Auditor, whether management has actually done that or not. So auditor will have to check whether the ICS is there or not, whether it is for working or not, whether it is an effect or not, whether it is continuous or not. So obviously it will be done by the management, checked by the auditor. So when the auditor is checking the ICS, we say that he is basically doing test of controls. It means whenever the auditor does test of controls, what is the procedure that he is doing? The procedure that he is doing is basically he is checking the ICS. Always remember one thing. Whenever you see this one word, which word? Controls. Controls basically mean nothing but ICS only. So ultimately, whenever I say test of controls is basically checking the ICS, whether it is there or not, whether it is functioning or not, whether it is an effect or not, whether it is continuous or not. So set up by the management, checked by the auditor. So what is test of controls? It is checking the ICS. Perfect. How will you remember? Controls means ICS, CC. All cool? All cool. Talking about substantive procedures. Now your substantive procedures is divided into two categories. One is test of details, other is analytical procedures. Analytical procedures obviously we will see later. Why? Because that is covered by SA 520, which is your chapter 8. So when we do chapter 8, we will see analytical procedures in great detail. So as of now, what we have to see? We have to see test of details. Now when I say test of details, details basically here means nothing but data, or you can also say information. Basically, now what is the data that the auditor is going to check? Can I say what he will check is the financial statements? Perfect. So whenever I say test of details basically is nothing but checking of the financial statements. It means what, if I'm the auditor, if I'm checking the financial statements, you know what I'm doing? I am doing test of details. Similarly, if I'm the auditor, if I'm checking the ICS, you know what I'm doing? I'm doing test of controls. You understand what I'm saying? So supposing if I'm checking the financial statements, what am I doing? What I'm applying is nothing but test of details. Perfect. Now this test of details is a part of substantive procedure. This test of details is a part of substantive procedure. Acha, one more thing. This is substantive. What was test of controls? Checking the ICS, correct. That is also known as compliance procedures. What? That is also known as compliance procedures. So when the auditor is doing compliance procedure, it means what he is checking is nothing but the ICS. How will you remember? Correct. CCC. That is how remember. Test of controls, compliance, ICS. So once you know CCC, that is done. When you talk about substantive procedure now, remember one thing. Substantive procedure basically focuses only on the financial statements. Even analytical procedures is basically ratio analysis. Ratio analysis happens of the financial statements only. So substantive procedure, everything is focused on the financial statements. And as far as your test of controls is concerned, which is your compliance procedure, that is always nothing but based on ICS. Acha, talking about test of details further, listen. Test of details include two things. One is vouching, other is verification. Vouching is basically checking all the P&L items. So when the auditor is checking all the incomes and expenses, it means what he is doing is vouching. On the other hand, verification is checking balance sheet items. It means when he is checking all the assets and liabilities, what he is doing is verification. We are going to learn on vouching and verification also in great detail, but when we do chapter number 9. As of now, you should understand vouching is checking nothing but P&L, verification is checking balance sheet. And obviously, when I say P&L balance sheet, together they will become financial statements. And therefore, it comes under test of details, which is checking the financial statements. You understood what happened? Acha, what examples I gave you of ICS? Somebody is asking, sir, what is the example of ICS other than CCTV? As if he has never paid attention. Can I say simple examples are CCTV cameras, identity cards, biometrics, authorizations and approvals. This authorization and approval is one of the very important examples of ICS. What example I gave you? For a simple example, if anybody wants to order purchases in the organization, can they order? No. Can I say only the authorized person can order? For example, that authorized person in the company is a purchase manager. So ultimately, I hope is only the purchase manager has the authority to order purchases from the suppliers, so that ultimately there is no fraud with respect to any purchases, etc. Similarly, if there is one person who is handling cash transactions, then only that person is authorized to do cash transactions. Nobody else can do any of the cash transactions authorization. Now, do you understand? Come on, now answer carefully. Come on. Firstly, when you talk about audit procedures, by the way, audit procedures means who is performing this? Auditor. These are audit procedures. Acha, they are firstly classified into two. Come on. First is risk assessment procedure. Next is other audit procedure. We are focused now on other audit procedure. Other audit procedure basically two. One is test of controls. Other is substantive. Acha, test of controls is also known as compliance procedures. Acha. Now, when I say test of controls, it is taking the correct ICS. How do you remember? Controls means ICS and compliance, so CCC. When you talk about substantive procedures, two. One is test of details and the other is analytical procedure. Can I say substantive procedure is basically focused on financial statements, whereas compliance is nothing but focused on ICS. Acha, test of details when you talk about broken up into two. One is vouching, other is verification. Okay, vouching is checking P&L, verification is checking balance sheet. So when I'm checking assets and liabilities, what am I doing? Verification. So what am I doing? Test of details. So which procedure am I doing? Substantive procedure. Acha, if I'm checking the P&L, then what am I doing? Vouching. Then what am I doing? Test of details. Which procedure am I doing? Substantive. You understood what I'm telling? Let me see how much do you understand. Say I'm the auditor and I'm checking nothing but the company's internal control system. Which procedure am I doing? Correct. Can I say what I'm doing is nothing but the compliance procedure, which is basically test of controls. Perfect. Acha, say I am nothing but doing ratio analysis. Correct. If you people appreciate ratio analysis is analytical procedure. So basically, I hope as you are doing substantive procedure. Okay. Say I am checking the company's accounting system. Accounting system. Come on. What am I doing? Test of controls or test of details? Test of details, because I hope realize ultimately I hope realize it is related to accounts. Anything which is related to the financial statements is always on the other side, substantive. It never becomes on the control side. Control side, everything should be related to only one thing, ICS. Only if it is related to ICS, it becomes test of controls or it becomes compliance procedures. Else it will always remain substantive. Acha, say I am checking the PNL. What am I doing? Correct. If I'm checking the PNL, basically I'm doing vouching. So basically what I'm doing is test of details. So basically what I'm doing is substantive procedures. All cool? Come to the textbook. Come. Let's finish this part. Page number, I have on 24, basically point 3. You will find audit procedures. Page 77. This risk assessment procedure, obviously, we are not going to do now. We are going to take up later when we people do that chapter 4. Okay. But definitely, what we are going to do now is further audit procedure or other audit procedures. In that, obviously, two things, compliance and substantive. Compliance, as you can see, is test of controls, whereas substantive, basically, I hope is known as test of details. Here it is. What do you mean by this AS? Accounting system. Correct. So compliance always CCC, and substantive is always related to accounting system or FS. Come on, Dania. Come on fast. I hope you read also. Huh? Hmm. Having done nothing but these audit procedures, when we started with this chapter, I told you there are basically two things in the chapter. One is documentation and other is evidence. Now we have understood the part with respect to evidence. So now we have to understand what do you mean by documentation. Correct. So the next part that we are going to now discuss is audit documentation. Now listen. As far as your documentation is concerned, your audit documentation is covered by the provisions of SA 230. So once we people finish learning documentation, we people also finish learning SA 230. Just like here we people were learning audit evidence, but audit evidence was covered by SA 500. So we people finish learning SA 500. So similarly, now when we do audit documentation, it is covered by SA 230. So what we'll also finish is by learning SA 230. Now focus. What do you mean by documentation? This we have seen somewhere, yeah. Where have we seen documentation? Yeah, somewhere we have seen. Can I say we have seen in that Andu Pandu Dondu? If you remember, there was a key. You remember the key? I can see what Andu Pandu Dondu cannot see. Now, key you remember. Problem is with respect to answer and the question. Question was, I hope right. That's why I told you refer the key chat. You people think key chat is time pass. It is not time pass. It is important. Key chat you have to keep on referring when you have time, so that you people don't forget the answer and the question. Keys you will remember. Now, come on, help me. Can I say this was Andu Pandu Dhondu Dhondu? Can I say that Dhondu was basically documentation? Correct. Can you give me one word for documenting? Correct. Recording. Good. Can I say basically what will happen? Can I say during the course of an audit, can I say the auditor will get a lot of information? When he gets a lot of information, auditor should fire the information. No. Can I say whatever information he gets, the auditor should make a record. This record of information, can I say, is known as documentation. So if anybody asks you, nobody will ask, huh? But I'm just saying. If anybody, if anybody will ever ask you, what do you mean by documentation? Then you should tell documentation in simple words is nothing but record of information. This documentation is also known as working papers. Which papers? Working papers. Yay. It is just a fancy name. Correct. There's nothing great about it. Whether you say working papers, whether you say documentation, meaning is one and the same. Just like information in two words, audit evidence. Audit evidence in one word, information. Similarly, documentation in two words, working papers. Working papers in one word, documentation. Is this okay? Huh. Now ahead. Listen, no. Doubt arises that okay, documenting is basically recording information. Doubt arises, what all will the auditor document? Basically, what the auditor documents are three things. What three things? One, the procedures that he has applied. So procedures performed. Acha, performed by whom? Auditor. So whatever procedures he has performed, I have checked this, I have checked this, I have checked this, I have checked this. He has to record. Why? It is because if at all later on, if at all anybody files a case against the auditor, that auditor was not doing audit properly, then I hope as the only thing that you have in your defense to submit is nothing but documentation. No. So whatever procedure you people have performed, you have to keep on writing so that later on in the court of law, you can submit as evidence. You understand what I'm telling? So ultimately, I hope as procedures performed. Secondly, whatever evidence he has obtained. For a simple example, say he has obtained confirmations. So whatever confirmations he get, whatever I hope realize, the evidences of supporting nature he gets, say record of minutes book he has. Similarly, I hope realize he has nothing but copies of nothing but all the invoices which are there. So whatever is there, think and tell me that evidence he will fire? No. Will he record? Yes. So firstly, he will record all the procedures that he has performed. Secondly, all the evidence which is obtained. And lastly, the conclusions which he has made. For a simple example, after checking the ICS, he came to know that the ICS is weak. So can I say that is a conclusion? Similarly, he came to know that the integrity of the management is not proper because management is not providing timely information. So ultimately, he came to a conclusion that management's intention are not that good. So obviously, then he will check more in depth. Similarly, say after checking the financial statements, the auditor came to know that the company is not following the laws and regulations properly. So ultimately, obviously, he came to a conclusion that ultimately the financial reporting framework is not followed. Say they are not making it on accrual basis properly. So that is also the conclusions made. So basically, whenever the auditor records information, he has documentation, he will basically record how many things? Three things. Come on. First is procedures performed. Second, evidence obtained. Thirdly, conclusions made. Repeating, first, procedures performed. Second, evidence obtained. Third, conclusions made. If you people appreciate the three are in line also. Firstly, I hope as the auditor has to perform procedures. Only then he will obtain evidence. Only then he can make a conclusion. Correct. So first, procedures perform, evidence obtain, conclusions made. All cool? All cool. Now, when you people talk about documentation, obviously, can I say it will have some advantages? Advantages, obviously, biggest advantage, obviously, for the auditor is it acts as an evidence. That is the biggest advantage. Okay. Apart from that, there are advantages like, can I say it will help in future reference? So for a simple example, if in the future, I want to see what happened in the past, then can I say I will have to go through my documentation so that I came to know what all I had done. Okay. Similarly, I hope realize it always assists the engagement team to carry out the audit properly. Now doubt. What do you mean by engagement team? Can I say it is a team which is carrying out the audit? Acha, will it include only the auditor? No. Can I say it will be the auditor? It will be the assistants. Can I say apart from that, it will be some employees or some experts, if any. So ultimately, I hope as when I have all of this together, can I say that becomes my team, but that team is known as which team? Engagement team. So ultimately, can I say, articles are assistants only? No, are you mad? Some people are writing, where are articles? Articles has not come. We have not come. We are not a part of the team. Are assistants is which assistant dash? Article assistant only, no? Huh. So ultimately, I hope guys, when I say this together, can I say this becomes a team? Which team? Engagement team. So can I say basically it assists the engagement team how to carry out the work? How? I'll tell you. When I say audit documentation, it also includes plan. Now I hope it is obviously the auditor should plan. We have done this, undo pandu, don't do pandu. Now the auditor should plan. Why? So that he can complete the audit in a timely and efficient manner. Correct? Acha, auditor should have one plan for all the businesses, no? No. Can I say different businesses will have different plans? So can I say plans of the auditor should be based on the knowledge of the client's business? Come on, yeah. Acha. Now that plan, when the auditor will make, can I say he will give to his engagement team, and thereafter engagement team will carry out the audit? Then use common sense. This plan is a part of my documentation, because obviously in the court of law I can show also, see, I had made a plan, according to that we were working. So this plan also is a part of your documentation. So can I say this document is helping the team to carry out the work? Acha. Now obviously as a part of documentation I will also record who did what work when, who did what work when, and when it was completed. In other words, I will hold my engagement team accountable for its work, responsible for his work. For a simple example, ultimately, this employee had done some work on some day. Then obviously you'll have to write it that this employee had done so and so work on so and so date. So that once you have a record, obviously it acts as your evidence. All cool? So see, these are the simple benefits here. What? Come on, tell me. Firstly, it acts as an evidence. Thereafter, it helps in future reference. Thereafter, it assists the engagement team to carry out the work. Obviously, it helps in planning, and thereafter it helps the team also to be accountable. Manageable? Acha. Apart from that, just to give you an example of audit documentation, it also includes something known as query sheet. Have you ever heard? You know what is query sheet? They are maintained by articles only, basically. Supposing if I'm the auditor and if I go to the client's premises, I'm including you also, okay? Say assistant. Now, ultimately, we go to the client's premises and we start doing audit. Now, can I say during the course of checking, we may get certain doubts. We may get certain queries. So obviously those queries have to be listed. And thereafter, those queries together, you people hand it over to the management on a regular basis. So that management comes out with nothing but the answers to them. Obviously, I require evidence on that. I require explanation on that. According to that evidence, what they will give me, and according to the explanation, what they will give me, eventually what will change is my opinion, whether true and fair is there or not. Wait, you understood what I told? Now, supposing if we go to the client's place and we are doing an audit, during the course, we will get many queries. So obviously we'll get many doubts. Will you keep the doubt in your head only? No, it has already so many things now. So ultimately you cannot keep it there. Since you cannot keep it there, you people make a query sheet, normally an Excel sheet. When you people make a query sheet, thereafter on a regular basis, hand over the queries to the management, but give a copy of the query sheet to the management. Don't give original. You give original query sheet to the management, now they will tear it, they will delete it, and they will tell, I don't know, it just got deleted. And eventually I hope realize, they want an excuse only not to do work. And ultimately they will tell you, now do again. You are not going to do again. So always give a copy of the query sheet to them. They will give you the answers and the explanation. According to the answers and explanation, what will change is auditor's opinion. All cool? Wait, when I say query sheet, this query sheet, when you people have, you'll fire it. No. Will you record it? Yes. So can I say once you again record it, it is a part of your documentation. All cools? All cools. Okay, no doubt. How much should be the audit documentation? It should be more or it should be less? Repeating. How much should be the documentation of information? More or less? See, you cannot say more or less like that only. Can I say obviously the content of documentation depends. That what should be the content? Whether it should be more or whether it should be less. Now think and answer. Huh? Firstly, can I say definitely it depends upon nothing but the size of the organization. Supposing if I tell you the size of the organization is big, then can I say obviously the queries also that you'll get will be more. The doubts also that you'll get is more. The planning also that you'll have to do will be in detail. Then use common sense. Ultimately, the working papers will be less or they'll be more. More. So can I say more the size of the organization, more will be the working papers? Come on, yeah. Okay. Can I say it also depends upon the reliability of the books of accounts? Think and answer. Huh? If books of accounts are more reliable, if books of accounts are more reliable, you will get more queries or less queries? Less queries. And if you get less queries, then ultimately I hope your working papers will become more or they will become less? Less. So can I say more reliable the books of accounts, lesser will be the working papers? Acha. Can I say it also depends upon how is your ICS? Supposing if I tell you that ICS is inefficient, weak, then working papers? Correct. Working papers will be more good. It is because if ICS is weak, more the frauds, more the frauds, more the procedures, more the procedures, more the checking, more the checking, more the information which I'll obtain, and more information I'll obtain, more will be the working papers. Come on, yeah. Acha. Apart from that, sometimes it also depends upon management's integrity. If the management is good, then obviously they will give me all the information per se only. If the management is good, frauds will be lesser, working papers will be lesser, and vice versa. So when I say how much should be the content of the working papers, can you directly tell? Can you directly tell? Few examples of factors: the size of the organization, the reliability of the books of accounts and records, the nature of the ICS. Till here, all okay? Come on, answer this much first. Then I'll tell you one extra question. Then we people will write something. Come on. Firstly, when you people talk about documentation, it is known as working papers. Documentation is basically nothing but recording of information. Basically, now what the auditor will record is three things. What three things? Come on. One, correct. Procedures performed, evidence obtained, conclusions made. What? Procedures performed, evidence obtained, conclusions made. Okay. Thereafter, ultimately, when you people talk about your audit documentation, will it have some purpose? Yes. I hope as it serves as an evidence. It acts as a future reference. It assists the engagement team to carry out the audit work. It obviously helps in the planning and performing of an audit. It helps in doing the audit in a quality manner. Apart from that, ultimately, it helps the team to be accountable for its work. Who has done what work when? And obviously, one of the examples of that is also query sheet. So it helps to solve doubts as well. Acha, apart from that, the content of the working paper should be more. No, there should be less. No, it depends. Yes. Can I say firstly, it depends upon the size of the organization. If the size of the organization is large, then obviously ultimately I hope realize the working papers also relatively will be more. On the other hand, reliability of the books of accounts. More reliable the books of accounts, lesser the working papers, and vice versa. Similarly, ICS. Inefficient the ICS, more the working papers, and vice versa. Acha. Sometimes you can also say the nature of the business. Huh? Example, Ray. Say for a simple example, if I tell you you are auditing Punjab National Bank. Now I hope realize you already know that it is into banking business, but ultimately I hope realize they entered into nothing but a huge fraud some while back. So ultimately, obviously, if they have already entered into fraud, can I say you are going to check more? Since you are going to check more, ultimately the working papers relatively will be more. So sometimes it also depends upon the nature of the business. All cools? All cools. Come, let us mark this much, then the extra question. Come to the beginning of the chapter, class. Here, audit documentation. Oh, definitely. Now, firstly, the meaning. Audit documentation refers to the record. This word is important. Record of what? One, audit procedures performed. Two, relevant audit evidence obtained. And three, conclusions the auditor reached. So obviously, once you people get evidence, you will document. Can I say it helps you to make a conclusion? So audit documentation provides a basis for conclusion. And secondly, evidence that audit was planned and performed as it was required to be performed. So basically two things: one, basis for conclusion, and secondly, evidence. Thereafter, the purpose of documentation, that is why do you do documentation normally? Firstly, it assists the engagement team to plan and perform audit. Now, when I say engagement team, it is the team carrying out the audit function. Thereafter, it helps to direct and supervise the work. Thereafter, it helps them to be accountable for their work. Then ultimately, it is a record for future audits. So it is future reference. Thereafter, it helps in quality control and it helps in external inspections. Negative report. Come on, yeah, done, yeah. Next is nothing but form and content and extent of documentation. That is basically what documentation should contain. I already told you basically it will contain three things: procedures performed, then evidence obtained, conclusions made. That is the basic things that it will contain. Okay, so it will revolve around those points only. So if you see, first is nothing but procedures performed. One. Thereafter, evidence obtained. This is two. Thereafter, conclusions reached. I'm telling you, it will revolve around those three only. Thereafter, document discussions with the management and TCWG. You already know TCWG. Hello. What is TCWG? Those starts with governance, top level management. Correct. And thereafter, document how the auditor addressed inconsistency to resolve doubts. In other words, can I say when there is doubts, it means query sheet. Obviously, when I say procedures performed, I already told you who check what work when. Basically, that is what is written here. Identifying characteristics of specific items or matters tested. So you are checking purchase, you are checking nothing but cash transactions, you are checking nothing but sales, you are checking nothing but I hope as assets, liabilities, verification, inventory, whatever. Similarly, if there is a manufacturing entity, there may be fixed assets which are very relevant. So if you are checking fixed assets, so whatever is tested, ultimately you write that. Second is ultimately who performed that, and obviously the date, and who reviewed that, whatever was done, and the date of such review. It is not difficult at all here. You should be thorough with everything, not difficult. I'm telling now, for audit documentation, at least remember those three things: procedures performed, evidence obtained, conclusions reached. It will help you throughout audit documentation. Correct. Dusra negative. Qualified report is different. Negative report, adverse is different. When we do auditors report chapter, now chapter 11, you will come to know. It's a very nice chapter, small chapter, but interesting, cute chapter. Some people are sipping away the coffee. Offer. No, yeah, I have not had anything yet till now. Come on, yeah, Dania. Come on. Next is factors which are affecting the form, content, and extent of documentation. See, important, huh? Listen, oi. This is form, content, and extent. Means what all should be there in documentation. This is factors which is affecting that. Matlab whether it should be more, whether it should be less, like that. Okay. In that now, this 6 and 7 you cancel first. So we have to do basically the first 5. First is the size and the complexity of the entity. Can I say obviously larger the entity, more complex the entity, more the working papers, and vice versa. Next, nature of audit procedures performed. Obviously, if you have performed more procedures, already you have got more evidence. Then ultimately, since you have got more evidence, you may get more doubts, more the working papers. Next, identified risk of material misstatement. Obviously, this risk of material misstatement is covered by chapter 4, but I'll still explain you in brief. What do you mean by misstatement? Tell me that much. Something which is properly stated or not properly stated? Not properly stated. When I say it is not properly stated, why it will not be properly stated? For two reasons, either on intention or by mistake. If it is not properly stated by mistake, can I say it is an error? But if it is not properly stated on intention, then it becomes a fraud. So basically, if you have a bit of common sense, can I say when I write misstatement, can I say misstatement in simple words is frauds and errors? Now, just like, acha, what is information in 2 words? Audit evidence. What is documentation in 2 words? Working papers. Similarly, what is misstatement in 2 words? Frauds and errors. Now, do you understand? Now, just read that. The identified risk of material misstatement. If I tell you that there is a high risk that frauds and errors will be more, think and answer. If frauds and errors will be more, you will check less or you'll check more? You will check more. And if you check more, you'll get lesser doubts or more doubts? More doubts. So obviously the working papers will be less or more? More. Correct. Now do you understand? Huh. Next is the significance of audit evidence obtained. Significance means the importance of the audit evidence. If I tell you the audit evidence which you are obtaining is not that relevant, not that important, not that significant which you got. So obviously now you will try and get more, no? Because that is not significant. So if you are trying to get more and more, obviously that significance will have an impact on how much should be the working papers. Because lower the significance, obviously you will try to get more and more working papers. And lastly, nature and extent of exceptions identified. You know what is exceptions? Inconsistency. Write down. Now, what do you mean by inconsistency? Inconsistency means the difference between the records and actuals. Inconsistency is basically the difference between records and actuals versus I've written records versus actuals. I'll give you an example, Rebaba. Horlicks, it seems, yeah. A written, yeah. Now listen, now see. For a simple example, so ultimately I am checking the balance sheet, and in the balance sheet of the company there is stock, and say stock is 1 lakh units. This is what they have written in the balance sheet. Now, obviously, I will have to also check no whether it is there in reality or not. So can I say I will have to conduct physical verification? I will have to be there. Management will do that, but I'll have to check whether what they are doing is proper or not. Say when they were physically verifying, the stock was only 70,000 units. Now think and answer. You tell me, is it matching? No. Is there an inconsistency? Yes. This inconsistency is known as exception. Now do you understand? Now think and answer. If there are more exceptions like this, the extent of exceptions is more. I hope as it is not matching only. Many things are not matching like this. Then obviously it means more the frauds. More the frauds. You'll check more. You'll check more. You'll get more queries. More queries. You'll get more the working papers. Now do you understand? Acha. So basically, I hope realize the factors which are affecting the form and content are very simple. Size of the organization, complexity of the organization, the nature of the audit procedures performed, thereafter the significance of the audit evidence which you are obtaining, the extent of the exceptions which you have identified, and the risk of material misstatement. All cool? All cool. Again, tell how many things are there? 5. Come on. 1. Correct. Size of the organization. Complexity also you can write. Next is nature of audit procedures. Next, risk of material misstatement. Significance of audit evidence obtained. Extent of exceptions identified. I'll just make it a bit simple. No, no, there is no key. If you just check properly now, this audit procedures again has come. So this is 1. Audit evidence again has come. So this is 2. See, wherever there is now audit exactly. I'm trying to tell you that only. Everywhere I hope there's procedures and evidence is there only. See, you should record what? 3 things now. Procedures performed, evidence obtained, conclusions reached. Again, I hope if you check in form and content, procedures performed, evidence obtained, conclusions reached. Again, if you check the factors which are affecting form and content, at least 2 things are there. I hope correct. Procedures performed, evidence obtained. So at least those two, though, you can easily learn no here. And apart from that, the nature of the organization, that is size of the organization, risk of material misstatement and exceptions. All cool? All cool. Come on, answer. Finally, what is audit documentation? Basic we have finished. You should be able to answer. Come on. When you people talk about audit documentation, it is covered by the provisions of which essay? Essay 230. Can you tell me documentation in one word? Recording. Correct. Documentation in 2 words? Working papers. So when I say documentation, some people told one word is working papers. Documentation, 2 words is working papers, 1 word is recording, no dash. Acha, can you tell me how many things he will record? Come on, yeah. 3 things. Come on, fast, fast, fast. Procedures performed, evidence obtained, conclusions made. Acha, thereafter, basically, this documentation provides 2 things. 1, the basis for making a conclusion, and secondly, the evidence for the auditor. Okay, that he has planned and performed the audit. Thereafter, purpose of carrying the documentation. That is also simple. I hope as assisting the engagement team, helps to direct and supervise the team. It holds the team accountable for its work. It is a record for my future audit. Apart from that, it helps to do audit in a quality manner, and it helps in external inspections. Acha. Thereafter, when you talk about form, content, and extent, what it should contain. Obviously, the procedures performed, who has done what work when. Thereafter, ultimately, the evidence, whatever you have obtained. Thereafter, the conclusions, whatever the auditor has reached. Apart from that, whatever you are talking with the management, whatever you are talking with the top level management, I hope as you want to document that. So document the discussions with the management and TCWG. And lastly, the queries. So in other words, whatever doubts you people got, whether they were resolved properly or not, that you have to document. Apart from that, next was nothing but the factors affecting the form, extent, and content. Very simple. The size of the organization. Apart from that, 2 things though you should know: evidence and procedures. Apart from that, size and complexity of the organization, the risk of material misstatement, and the exceptions which were there, extent of exceptions. All cool? All cool. Last thing now you should know, which is an additional question, is what does documentation not include? See, this is what documentation includes. Correct. Now there is also a question, what audit documentation does not include? That is not here. It was there in the one suggested answer, so I picked up an answer there. You write down extra question karke in your notebooks. After this, what do we have? Yeah, FM only. No, accounts. Something different today. Four marks. Huh? Who is there here? Who is doing that? Accounts. Ketan Baba. There are four things. Okay, four things, 4 marks. As simple as that. Right on. Point number one. Notes that reflect incompleteness. So if there is anything incomplete, he will not document. Duplicates of the documents. Because if he has original, why will he duplicate it? No? So duplicates of documents. Next, preliminary thinking. Now, what do you mean by this? I don't know. Institute also has not defined. But basically, it means that when he is making a strategy, he does not want to document. But there is one more chapter which says strategy has to be documented, which is chapter 2. But yes, preliminary thinking. So whatever he is thinking, don't document. What is he thinking like that? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe right, previous copies of documents. Institute तो यार अरे copies of documents रे corrected for typographical. Oh, ho, English typographical or other errors. In other words, erroneous documents. Yeah. So what all is there? First is incompleteness. Second are duplicates. Next is preliminary thinking, and the last are anything which is corrected for typographical or other errors. So see, four things he will not document. Huh? First is any document which is incomplete, any duplicate document, any preliminary thinking, God knows what that is. And lastly, it is nothing but any documents which are corrected for any typographical or other errors. Because if at all it is nothing but I hope realize there is an typographical error. Obviously, you may feel that what is there is wrong. So you want nothing but a proper document, not something which is nothing but I hope realize erroneous document. Erroneous document will not hold good that much in the court of law. All cool? Come on. So how many things are there? Four. Come on, tell me. Firstly, notes that reflect incompleteness. So anything incomplete, he will not document. Next is duplicates of document. If you already have the original, you don't want the duplicates of documents. Next is preliminary thinking. And the last is previous copies of the documents which are corrected for typographical error. Because if the documents are erroneous, they cannot be accepted as evidence in the court of law. All cool? All cool. Bus, we'll relax for 2-3 minutes, and after that, we will start with something known as audit file. It's a very good concept. After 2-3 minutes, I'll start. Go upload and download. Come. Come on, yeah, come back, settle down. क्या कर रही है? क्या? बता 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 बता। मोनाको है। अपलोड डाउनलोड बोला मतलब पूरा करने का ही नेसेसरी. हाँ, and that also sitting eating in front of me like this. So rude या. दो ही पीस का. अच्छा. नहीं तो क्या बे. हाँ. Okay, shall we? Come, listen. Oi. Acha. Now, when we people talk about audit file, understand what is the concept of audit file. Not difficult. Just pay attention. You will understand. Listen. Now, can I say, obviously during the course of an audit, auditor will get lot of information. Obviously, this information auditor should make a record. Now, basically, when I say information, major information, can I say will be documentary in nature. For a simple example, I have a plan that is a paper. Similarly, I hope realize who did what work when. So obviously, I'll have to prepare on a paper. Similarly, query sheet. So that also is paper. Similarly, I hope realize I get confirmation from the debtor. That is a paper. I get some information or confirmation from the management. Again, that is a paper. So in other words, I hope realize there is paper, 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 paper. What? There is paper, 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 paper. Now use common sense here. When there is so much paper, 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 will you keep it like this only? Paper, 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 paper? No. Can I say you will have to assemble the paper in a file? This file is known as audit file. Oh, acha. So what is audit file? Very simple. Can I say it is basically nothing but the assembling of nothing but all the documents. In other words, I hope it is gathering all the records. It is gathering all the information. So once you people have paper, 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 obviously that paper, 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 paper you will not keep. Correct? So you will have to assemble it in a file, which is known as audit file. Correct. So if anybody asks you, will anybody ever ask? No, correct. But if anybody ever asks you, what do you mean by audit file? What should be your answer? You will tell like this. Sit down. I'll tell you, and then you will tell. See, there'll be paper, 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 and then like this you'll explain dash some meaning. So you'll have to tell no. So can I say it is basically recording and assembling all the documents that is known as nothing but audit file. All cools. All cools. Somebody is like ICI will ask us. Now pay attention. Now, when you people talk about audit file, obviously I told you paper, 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 paper. You have to assemble in the audit file. You cannot take a lifetime to assemble the file. You cannot take a lifetime. You will be like, I will relax. In lockdown, I'm chilling. So I don't want to ultimately do filing now. I'll do later. No, there is a time limit to assemble the audit file. That time limit I have told, no, it is told by ICAI. And that ICAI has told under something known as SQC1. What? SQC1. What is SQC1? Standard on quality control. What? Standard on quality control. So as per ICAI, under SQC1, there is a time limit to assemble the audit file. Now, what is the time limit in which you should assemble the audit file? it should not be more than 60 days from the end of audit. Repeating, it should not be more than 60 days from the end of audit. It means, can it be less than 60 days? Yes. Can it be equal to 60 days? Yes. Should it be more than 60 days? No. So ultimately, I hope there is a time limit in order to assemble the audit file, and that time limit is maximum how many days? 60 days from the end of audit. Now, when do you calculate those 60 days? You calculate those 60 days from the time that you people put your sign on what? Audit report. So when you people sign the audit report, I hope realize you have to write down what is the date of your signature. Now, whatever is this date of sign will be nothing but the date of your auditor's report. You understand what I'm telling? Acha. So audit file is basically nothing but assembly of all the records and documents, and this has to be assembled in a time limit. Okay. Oh, I have told that. No, I say. Acha. And some standard on auditing? No. Standard on quality control one, which is known as SQC one. Acha, the time limit is, it should be more than 60 days. Oh, sorry, more than 45 days. Oh, sorry. No. Can I say it should be maximum 60 days? It cannot be more, but it can be less or it can be equal to. All cool? You will not believe examination question 2 marks. Correct, incorrect. The auditor has to assemble the audit file within a period of 45 days from the end of audit. False. Can I say it is 60? And for that you get 2 marks. Huh. All cools? All cools. A bit more ahead. Focus, huh? Now, obviously, when you people talk about audit file, again, it is a record of information only. So obviously this audit file is also auditor's documentation only, no? He is recording information only, no? So it is a part of documentation only. So can I say it is basically like working papers only? Think and answer now. Think and answer. Can you tell me whose ownership is this documentation? Documentation is whose ownership? Working papers has whose ownership? Management's, clients, or auditors? Perfect. Can I say it is the ownership of the auditor? It is not the ownership of the management. Array, use common sense, no? Working papers are prepared by the auditor. So they are the property of the auditor. They are not the property of the management. Array, I have done I have done auditor. So ultimately it is correct, my responsibility, my property. Is it the property of the management? No. So think and answer. Can the management demand the working papers from the auditor? No. Acha, but can the management request the auditor from some working papers? Yes. But is the auditor under an obligation to share some documents? No. He can share the documents only at his own discretion. What do you mean by discretion? Yeah. Correct. Can I say discretion means will or choice? So can I say if the auditor wants to share his working papers with the management, he can share as per his own discretion, but he's under no obligation. The management cannot demand the auditor to share the working papers. If he wants to share, he will share as per his own choice, but he's under no obligation. I hope you followed. Wait. So whose ownership? Whose property? Management. No. But they are containing information of company only. So management's property. No. They are prepared by, correct, auditor. So property of the auditor, not the property of the management. So management can anytime at least demand the working papers. No. Can they request? Yes. Auditor is under an obligation to share? No. He will share only as per his own discretion. In other words, choice. But definitely he is under no obligation. Till here, all cool? All cool. Next part. What about the retention of these working papers? Important. Think and answer. Huh? Now, my simple question, when you people have documents, so can I say you'll have to retain also? Acha, you will retain for how long? Till the time you like? Till the time the company remains or you remain, whichever is earlier? No, no. Then you will retain for how long? Yeah. Tell me no, yeah. 8 years? 8 years? Ah. You know why normally people say 8 years? It is because that is the financial statements, books of accounts, 8 years as per companies. So you are telling 8 years here also. 8 years is wrong. you have to retain your documentation for a minimum period of 7 years. Repeating, you have to retain your documentation for a minimum period of 7 years. Now, I told minimum period of 7 years. Now, when I say minimum, can it be more? Yes. Can it be equal to? Yes. Should it be less than that? No. See, be careful, huh? I hope you realize here the time limit was less than equal to 60 days. Here the retention period is greater than equal to 7 years. Because here it was in maximum 60 days it should be ready. Here you'll have to retain for minimum 7 years. You understand difference? Acha, have I told this? No. Again, this is told by I say AI under the same SQC. Which SQC? SQC1. Is this okay? Wait. So, basically what we have understood are three things. The meaning of audit file, then ultimately the assembly of the audit file in how many time, the ownership and retention of working papers. Now think and answer. Firstly, the meaning of audit file. What do you mean by audit file? Can I say obviously there will be documents. So there'll be paper, 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 paper. So auditor has to assemble them in a file which is known as audit file. Now think and answer. This assembly of the audit file has to be done by the auditor within a period of dash days. 60 days from the start of audit. I'm mad end of audit. Acha, when I say date of auditor's report, that is date of what? Correct. Signing. Should it be less than 60 days is fine? Yes. Equal to 60 days is fine? Yes. More than 60 days is fine? No. Acha. Thereafter, ultimately, this document or working papers is the property of the management. Oh, sorry, sorry. It is a property of the client. Oh, sorry, sorry. It is a property of the auditor. Oh, yes, yes. Acha. Obviously, the auditor is under an obligation to share his working papers with the client. No. Acha, but the client can always demand. No, but the client can request. Yes, the auditor can show the working papers if he so desires as per his own discretion. Yes, and thereafter these working papers have to be retained for a period of 5 years from the end of audit. Oh, sorry, sorry, 8 years from the end of audit, just like books of account. Oh, no, no, 7 years from the end of audit. Acha, it is maximum 7 years. No, minimum. Can I keep for more? Yes, if you love nothing but piling up, ultimately you may do so. Acha, can it be equal to 7 years? Yes. Should it be less than that? No. I have told no. ICI? Yes. Under SQC1. All cools? All cools. Not bad, yeah? Come, let us mark this much. Then we'll do a small short note on completion memorandum. Come. Textbook class. Audit file. Next part only. In that audit file, basically this point is important. Now, what is audit file? It may be defined as one or more folders or other storage media, physical or electronic, containing records that comprise of audit documentation for a specific engagement. Engagement means what? Audit. Thereafter, the auditor shall assemble the audit documentation in an audit file and complete the administrative process of assembling the final audit file on a timely basis after the date of auditor's report. So basically, they are telling that it should be assembled. And that time limit, who has told? SQC1, which is on quality control, requires firms to establish policies and procedures for timely completion. Firms means you're talking about CA firms, okay? For the assembly, an appropriate time limit within which the completion should happen of the assembly of the audit file is ordinarily not more than 60 days. So it is less than equal to 60 days, obviously from the date of auditor's report. Hey, come on, yeah, manageable. Very. Thereafter, completion memorandum, I'll tell you shortly. Don't worry about that. Thereafter, ownership of working papers. Mark this also important. No, SQC1, which is issued by the institute, provides that unless otherwise specified by law or regulation, audit documentation is the property of the auditor. That is important. He may, at his discretion, that is choice or will, make portions or extracts from. What is extracts? Extract means a part from audit documentation available to the client, provided such disclosure does not undermine the validity of the work performed. It means you have not done something wrong. So most important is this part, property disclosure. At the end, you write down now. That is, the auditor is under no obligation to share his working papers with the client slash management. Danya. Okay. Next, what we have is retention of working papers. Obviously, retention will happen after you assemble the file. So after the assembly of the final audit file has been completed, the auditor shall not delete or discard the documentation before the end of its retention period. But then what is the retention period? SQC1 requires again the firms to establish policies and procedures for retention of the engagement documentation. The retention period is no shorter than 7 years. It means it should be greater than or equal to 7 years from the date of auditor's report. Or if later, the date of group auditor's report. See, group auditors is basically joint audit. So obviously joint audit is when all the joint auditors sign. Say one joint auditor is signed now, other joint auditor is signed after 1 week. Then ultimately you will have to take nothing but after 1 week, because then that is the time when all the auditor's signature is there on the report. They're like, yeah, it's common sense. That's why I'm explaining, no? No, nothing like that, yeah. People are eating Monaco. They are having Horlicks, not offering. Offer कर तू पहले, शर्म नहीं आता देखो. ठीक है. Hey, come on, yeah, Dania. Can I say quite manageable, yeah? Acha, this also comes in the examination for 2 marks. Correct, incorrect question. The auditor has to retain the working papers for a period of 8 years from the end of audit. No, no, no. It is for a period of 7 years from the end of audit. Correct. Come on here, till here all fine. Okay, there is one more extra question, but even before I do that extra question, let us just finish this completion memorandum. So once ultimately that is finished, then ultimately we don't have that much of a problem to do that extra question later, because this is the only one remaining. Now listen. Yeah, date of auditor's report is the date of signing. Yeah. Arey, when you people put your signature na, then you have to also write the date when you signed. So whatever is this date na, that is your date of auditor's report when you sign. Okay, now listen now. Wait, let me just clean up it. Okay. Now, when you people talk about completion memorandum, what is completion memorandum? Completion memorandum is basically a summary of documents. For a simple example, ultimately, I hope realize I will have too much documentation about the client, but I hope realize if I want a quick referencer, then ultimately I hope realize it is better to go for a summary. No, it is something like this. You have the entire chapter, but you have summary notes. So when you have summary notes, that summary notes is known as completion memorandum. Why? So that ultimately looking at that, I come to know what is entirely in a short period of time. So similarly, I hope as the auditor also may prepare a summary notes for a particular engagement for a particular audit, and that summary notes that he prepares is basically known as completion memo random. Can I say obviously it will help the auditor to save time when he wants to do reference. Bus. See, the auditor may consider it helpful to prepare and retain as a part of audit documentation a summary, sometimes known as completion memorandum, that describes what significant matters identified during the audit and how they were addressed. Now, when I say how they were addressed, what do you mean by that? Addressed is answered. For a simple example, if I got any query, obviously then they should give me some solution to it. No? When they give me some solution, can I say it was addressed? Acha. Obviously, when I say significant matters, it can be any matter. It can be matter with respect to ICS. It can be matter with respect to the financial statements. It can be the matter with respect to a particular item in the financial statements. Be it purchase, be it sales, be it cash, be it inventory, be it fixed assets, anything. So ultimately, I hope realize I can describe anything which is significant for that particular audit. Like for you can say trading industry, stock is inventory, stock is important, it is significant. For a manufacturing industry, fixed assets is important. So like that, so whatever is the significant matter that you want to address, you can write that. Now, such a summary, why is it helpful? It may facilitate efficient and effective review and inspection of the audit documentation, particularly for large or complex audit. Obviously only if the organization is that large you make a summary. No, if the chapter is small you'll make a summary. Further, such preparation of a summary may assist the auditor's consideration of significant matters. I'll just give you one more example. Say for a simple example, auditor checked the company's ICS, but the company's ICS with respect to stock was very inefficient. For a simple example, they did not have a storekeeper, or say there was no CCTV in the godown, or proper stock records are not maintained. So when the auditor will make a summary now, I hope he will write in significant matters inventory, and he will write there ICS inefficient. So that I hope when he checks the inventory, obviously the focus to check that is more because ICS is inefficient for the inventory. Now do you understand? So basically completion memorandum, summary of documentation.